I'm Chief Justice Ron Castile, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and we have one of my fellow justices, Madam Justice Deborah Todd, who will have a lot more to say than I do, because she was the individual that the court assigned to get this group together and come up with this report, which is, as you can tell, voluminous and detailed. If societies are judged on how they help their most vulnerable, now is the time to craft solutions as older Pennsylvanians face physical, emotional, and financial abuses. We have been active in the Supreme Court in addressing kids in foster care. The youngest kids, Justice Max Baer was in charge of that. We had the ICJJ in Luzerne County, which addressed critical issues with the juvenile delinquency problems in that particular county, but led to a series of reforms throughout the whole state of Pennsylvania and the juvenile justice laws of Pennsylvania. And it made those laws and that our ability to handle juveniles correctly and efficiently much stronger. In 2008, when I became the Chief Justice of Pennsylvania, we hosted a national conference in which more than 60 Chief Justices and state court administrators, such as Zig Pines, where's Zig? Right here. This is Zig Pines, our state court administrator. He was co-chairman with Justice Todd on this, handling the administrative part. Well, he and I went to this national conference, and that's where they started discussing the role that the courts should play in handling orders and administrations of justice that affect the elders. Zig Pines and I both attended the event, and we started our work at that time to looking into the issues facing elder Pennsylvanians. For the next 4 years, we did research. We studied the problems of guardianships, the expanding, growing problems of financial exploitation of the elderly, and particularly abuse of the power of attorney. So our concern was based on some facts, and Deborah Todd will get into those more deeply, but Pennsylvania ranks 4th in the nation in the percentage of individual citizens 60 and older, of which I am one. As of the 2010 census in Pennsylvania, 21% of the state's population were elderly. That computed out to 2.7 million citizens of Pennsylvanians, and it is expected by 2020 that number will increase to 3.3 million. So based on that information that we saw, Zig Pines and I concluded that it was necessary to change the way the court addresses the elder, and we decided that the courts could not do it alone. So in 2013, our court tasked Madam Justice Deborah Todd to form and chair a multidisciplinary task force focusing on determining particular concerns regarding the elders and considering ways to be proactive about addressing our perceived impact on the growing populations of elders in Pennsylvania. We are releasing the report today, and as I said, you can see it is voluminous, comprehensive, and I think it'll be the blueprint for how we handle from now on in Pennsylvania the problems that we have addressed with elder citizens. Madam Justice Todd convened a group of 36 experts from various groups across the country, all of who had an interest in elders and their interactions with the court. The mission of the task force was to lay the foundation for substantive improvements in the way elderly citizens in Pennsylvania interact with the court system, and to deliver a blueprint for all agencies to address these challenges. This is the result of an 18-month study. The task force came up with these recommendations to serve as model practices and to guide leaders in other branches of the governments and the communities to advocate on behalf of elder citizens who need and deserve assistance. The Supreme Court is going to be the first agency that we will review the recommendations related to the court. But equally important, the court recognizes that we need a partnership with the legislature on elder law issues. So enactment of legislation will be a necessary component in carrying out the many recommendations made by this task force. So we look forward to discussion with the numerous legislative recommendations made by the report when the House and Senate convene in January. So on behalf of my fellow justices and the entire judiciary, I want to specifically thank Justice Deborah Todd, and Zygmunt Pines, our court administrator, and the entire task force for the work that they did to get us where we are today. I now will present to you Madam Justice Deborah Todd. Deborah.
Thank you, Chief. This is a tremendous day for the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. God knows we've needed one. Today's release of the Elder Law Task Force report represents the culmination of 18 months of dedication, commitment, and volunteerism by 36 elder law experts who joined Court Administrator Zig Pines and me on this journey. This project was a cooperative effort by individuals who already had more than full plates of their own substantial and weighty positions. The individuals who comprise the task force who stand behind me here this morning have tremendous expertise and experience in judging, prosecuting, litigating, and teaching. They head agencies, they direct programs, and they publish authoritative treatises. Despite their busy lives and demanding professions, each one of these individuals not only took my call, but accepted my challenge. That challenge was to bring to the table their diverse perspectives on the substantial issues facing our Commonwealth's elders and facing our courts and government, and to make thoughtful and bold recommendations for meeting the needs of our growing elder population. Our nation and Commonwealth are truly blessed to have an increasing number of elders who are living longer, healthier, and active lives. Those of the greatest generation who served our country and others of advanced years have contributed and continue to contribute to our society. These citizens impart a wealth of wisdom, a deep understanding of our past, and an abiding faith that links the past, present, and future. Many elders are not only active in the workplace, but also are volunteers who selflessly devote countless hours to others. As the Commonwealth's population continues to age, the court system is facing unprecedented needs. Court cases dealing with the protection of vulnerable elders, including guardianships and elder abuse proceedings, are expected to increase substantially. The Pennsylvania court's capacity to provide services and remedies must be bolstered to meet the growing numbers and needs of older adults. The range, efficacy, and quality of services that abused, neglected, and exploited older persons receive from the courts is a matter of public trust and confidence. This project was the brainchild of Chief Justice Ron Castile and our state court administrator, Zig Pines. The Chief Justice has a deep and abiding concern for the welfare of our Commonwealth's elders, and it became my mission to see that this project was completed prior to his retirement at the end of this year as a tribute to him. He will need to explain to me at some point why I, as the only non-elder member of the Supreme Court, was assigned this chairmanship, although I do feel a lot older now than when I began. When the Chief Justice asked me to undertake the formation and leadership of the task force, I was indeed honored, but challenged by the daunting responsibility I knew this would entail. My first task was to assemble a blue ribbon panel of experts in all areas of elder law to bring together the diverse and critical perspectives of the myriad stakeholders in our aging network. Our task force was divided into 3 committees to commence their work. I would like to introduce our committee chairs and vice chairs, most of whom are here with us today. Our Guardians and Counsel Committee Chair, Judge Joseph O'Keefe, and Vice Chair, Judge Penny Blackwell. Our Guardianship Monitoring Committee Chair, Judge Paula Ott, and Attorney Risa Newman, Vice Chair, and Elder Abuse and Neglect Committee Chair, District Attorney Steve Zapala, and Vice Chair Wilmarie Gonzalez. I would also like to acknowledge all of the task force members and our valuable staff who are here with us today. Obviously, we could not have completed this project without the tremendous effort of our staff. We're very grateful to them, and all of you, task force and staff alike, have my deepest gratitude. One of the things that you will notice from our report is the definition of the term elder. While we recognize that many adults live long and healthy and productive lives well beyond the age of 60, for purposes of this report, the Elder Law Task Force defines an elder as a person 60 and over. This is based on the use of that age by the Pennsylvania Department of Aging. After numerous meetings, conferences, and study of the issues, the committees came up with detailed findings on which they based their recommendations. The task force as a whole discussed each of these recommendations and arrived at additional overarching findings and recommendations, which are also contained in the report. The final 130 recommendations were categorized to identify the entity to which the task force is speaking. The recommendations are directed to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the legislative branch, the executive branch, the federal government, prosecutors, victim services providers, bar associations, and the public. While the recommendations are far too numerous and detailed to address with any specificity at a press conference, I hope that you will review them because I believe each and every one is important. For those of you who want to read the Elder Law Task Force report, which is quite meaty, if you want to read it online, you can do so by going to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court website, which is pacourts.us. When you go to our webpage, you'll see at the very top a picture of the Elder Law Task Force, and you'll click on Elder Law Task Force, and you can access the entire report. I would like to briefly just highlight a few of the recommendations which I believe are particularly noteworthy. The first two recommendations in the report are directed to the Supreme Court. As there was unanimity among the task force members very early on that there was an immediate need to act on these two recommendations, I took them to my colleagues on the Supreme Court, and they've already been voted on and approved. These two recommendations are that the court establish an office of elder justice in the courts. I'm so pleased that our Supreme Court has accepted this recommendation, and this office will be established commencing work in January 2015. It will be as part of the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts here in the Pennsylvania Judicial Center in Harrisburg, and it will have the purpose of effectively and efficiently implementing the task force's recommendations. I'm also pleased to announce that AOPC Assistant Director of Judicial Programs, Cherston Hamill, has been assigned to head this office. She's here? Yes. Hi, Cherston. The second recommendation that has already been acted upon by the Supreme Court is to establish an advisory council on elder justice in the courts. Again, the Supreme Court has already voted and approved this recommendation, and the advisory council will serve as a liaison to the executive and the legislative branches, and will communicate with the AOPC and the Supreme Court regarding the implementation of the task force's recommendations and regarding other matters involving elder justice. And I'm very pleased to report that Superior Court Judge Paula Francisco Ott has been appointed to chair the advisory council, and you will be hearing from her in a few minutes. Some additional important recommendations of the task force include number 43, the training of guardians. The task force is recommending that training be mandated for all guardians in Pennsylvania, including training on matters of liability and ethics. Recommendation number 44 concerns a recommendation for a requirement of criminal background checks for all guardians. The task force is recommending that all individual guardians, both family members and professionals, be required to undergo criminal background checks. Power of attorney is a huge issue, and one issue that this task force spent a lot of time studying. With respect to some of the critical issues surrounding problems in powers of attorney, the task force made several recommendations. In particular, number 100 recommends that the General Assembly enact a statute consistent with Section 116 of the Uniform Power of Attorney Act to statutorily broaden and specify those individuals and entities who have standing to request judicial review of the actions of agents operating under a power of attorney. Another important issue concerned mandatory reporting. Number 104 recommends that financial institutions be statutorily required to be mandatory reporters of suspected financial abuse or exploitation of elders. Number 102 concerns the Pennsylvania Slayer statute. One of the most forward-thinking and bold recommendations originated at the suggestion of task force member Neil Hendershot, and it concerns a proposed amendment to our state's Slayer statute in order to prevent an abuser from benefiting from the assets or the estate of an elder. The task force is recommending that the General Assembly consider enacting amendments to the existing Pennsylvania Slayer statute to include not only homicide, but also elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation resulting in convictions of specified crimes. Such a statutory expansion would be a progressive and significant step toward addressing both the prevention and remediation of serious elder abuse. Number 26 in our report concerns a proposed Bill of Rights. The task force has drafted and recommended the use of two versions of a Bill of Rights, one for alleged incapacitated persons and one for incapacitated persons. These bills of rights outline the rights the alleged incapacitated persons have during the guardianship adjudication process and the rights that they have after they have been adjudicated incapacitated. Number 88 recommends that the Advisory Council study the feasibility and benefits of collaborating with and encouraging colleges, universities, and law schools to develop their own elder clinics and other programs to assist elder Pennsylvanians in accessing social services, and with appropriate supervision, drafting or reviewing simple documents such as a power of attorney or a living will. The development of such elder clinics could provide tremendous benefits to older Pennsylvanians. The task force also addressed the critical issue of the need for funding. The task force is recommending that the General Assembly, in the interest of all Pennsylvanians, provide an annual appropriation to the Supreme Court for the implementation and ongoing support of the initiatives in this report. We also recommend that the General Assembly explore other avenues, other available sources of funding, such as the state lottery, to support the initiatives in this report. Finally, the task force made important recommendations to the public regarding the reporting of elder abuse. The task force is recommending that any Pennsylvanian who believes an elder displays the warning signs of neglect or mistreatment should report such symptoms by calling either of the state's two elder abuse hotlines. These statewide elder abuse hotlines can be reached at 1-800-490-8505 or through the Attorney General's office at 1-866-623-2137. Abuse reports can be made on behalf of any older adult who lives in his or her home or in a nursing home, a personal care home, or a hospital, and a caller may remain anonymous. The task force also recommends that every Pennsylvanian learn the signs that indicate elder abuse and take steps to prevent it. Vice President Hubert H. Humphrey once said, "The moral test of a government is how it treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the aged, and those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped." With the release of this report and recommendations, the Elder Law Task Force has taken bold and significant steps toward enhancing the quality of life for our Commonwealth's elder population, and I could not be more proud of the work which has been accomplished. Our goal was to make a valuable contribution to the dialogue here in Pennsylvania and to inspire action. On behalf of the task force, I respectfully urge each entity to whom an entreaty is made to give serious consideration to these recommendations, so that together the three branches of Pennsylvania government, along with others in the Aging Network, may work together to improve the lives and futures of Pennsylvania's elders. Thank you. I would now like to introduce the newly appointed chair of the Advisory Council to the Office of Elder Justice in the Courts, Judge Paula Francisco Ott.
I'm very honored by the faith that has been placed in me by Chief Justice Castile and Justice Todd and the other members of the Supreme Court. Before I was elected to the Superior Court, I was an orphans court judge in Chester County for 18 years, handling many guardianship and protection from abuse cases, as well as protective services cases of the elderly. So this is a topic that I'm very familiar with and has remained near and dear to my heart, and I very much look forward to the challenge that is ahead of us and the advisory committee in implementing this very important document. Thank you.
We're willing to entertain questions on the Elder Law Task Force, should there be any. Yes, sir.
Justice, in layman's terms, can you tell us what you guys are seeing as the biggest problem as relates to elder law? Are they being swindled, or what exactly is the biggest problem facing seniors?
I would say the problems are twofold. Certainly there's a myriad of problems, but the ones that rise to the forefront are elder abuse and neglect. And we're going to see more and more cases, unfortunately, of elders who are being financially swindled, who are being exploited, and who sometimes are being abused by the individuals that they have depended on to take care of them. Sadly, these cases often involve family members. So the criminal justice system is stepping up, and we have some recommendations in that regard with the reporting and prosecuting of criminal cases. The second line of cases that we're focused on concern guardianships and powers of attorney. How to handle matters that elders need help with when they are unable to manage their own resources, when they're unable to take care of themselves. And we want to see the courts get more involved in the guardianship area and in supervising and overseeing guardianships so that no individual elder is taken advantage of.
In your mind, are there gaps in the law currently? Now, after the Sandusky situation, a number of the legislature in this past session passed a number of reforms to help what they saw as weaknesses. Do you see similar weaknesses in our law as pertaining to elders and that they need legislative fixes?
Well, I think there are some issues that can be addressed by the legislature, and we've addressed some of those specifically in the reports. And mandatory reporting by banks is a big recommendation that probably is a gap in the law, as you phrase it, because banks and financial institutions are often the first to encounter an individual who is taking advantage of another, and mandatory reporting as required by the General Assembly would go a long way. Yes?
On that mandatory reporting for the banks,
Yes.
is there any penalties if they don't report?
Well, it wouldn't be up to us. It would be up to the legislature to craft a statute that addressed it. But our recommendation would be that the legislature study the issue and craft a statute that has been undertaken in other states as well to encourage mandatory reporting. Yes?
Are there other states that require mandatory training of guardians?
Let me ask Judge Paula Ott if she is aware of any other states that require mandatory training of guardians.
No, I'm not really aware of any that are mandatory, but I do know that we have started a pilot project that it was going independently of the task force in York County to train guardians. And one of our concerns as an orphans court judge was, first of all, it's hard to find a guardian sometime who's willing to work with these people if they don't have family. So if you're using a professional guardianship, it might be a little easier to be sure that there's training. But right now, we're working on that pilot project. I don't know if Judge Blackwell wants to speak to that further.
We are actively, Judge Blackwell from York County. Thank you. I'm not used to this. I'm always in court. With respect to this, Tristan is helping us with our grant and also with formulating how guardians can be trained. It is an undertaking that has now involved 2 meetings where we've had guardians come in. We went underway of trying to get guardians identified and going through our files to have them come to a training session. And it was very interesting to us because these are folks who struck us in both sessions we had as caring for the incapacitated person, but they really didn't have a grasp of what to do. Even though they were given the handout sheet we give to each guardian who's appointed, they did not know things such as do not commingle your funds. Some did not know that. Some did not know to go to the bank. And so tell the bank that we are changing things, and sometimes that's where it becomes very important that the bank understands what's going on, so the training is needed there. But it's one where the guardians, with this program that we have, we hope to run it statewide, obviously with comments from other individuals who are involved in this, but it's one we really feel is necessary to train the guardians. Any other questions?
All the issues you're talking about are dealt with to some degree by the Departments of Aging, Public Welfare, the Attorney General's office. How will this new office dovetail with what's out there now? And what is the biggest, is guardianship the issue that most needs attention?
It's one of the issues that most needs attention, and thank you, Judge Blackwell. I think that Wilmarie Gonzalez from the Department of Aging, who is a vice chair of one of our committees, could speak to some of these issues in terms of what we can add to the mix. But what we would like to do is have a collaboration among the 3 branches of government and not have us all going in different directions, because we all share common goals and we share common interests, so hopefully we can arrive at some common solutions. Let me ask
I think you answered the question.
You don't have anything to add?
No, I
Well,
don't.
I'll just thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
One of the first indications sometimes is when these elderly citizens come into court as a result of abuse, and they wouldn't necessarily come into the Department of Aging or those fine agencies. So often we're the first reporters or first responders to that. So unfortunately, we as judges have seen some of these terrible cases where an elderly citizen comes in whose bank statements have been cleaned out, or who've been physically abused by, loved ones, or former loved ones, I guess you would call them. So sometimes we're the ones that get it first.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Yes.
You know the financial situation of the Commonwealth. To what extent will your goals here be impeded by a lack of funding, additional funding for these kind of things?
Well, we're certainly cognizant of the, funding crisis, the budget crisis that the state faces. The Supreme Court itself consumes a very small part of the state's budget. Chief, is it less than 1%?
It's at 1/2 of 1%.
1/2 of the state's budget. So we're hoping that the General Assembly can find it in its collective heart to allocate more money to the Supreme Court for the implementation of these programs. Any other questions? I thank you all very much for coming and for your support of the Elder Law Task Force.